Here is this week's charity news, the 31st of October 2025. Swimming at Medina is on Monday between 1:15 p.m. and 2 p.m. We have the whole pool, so whether you wish to swim lanes or just have gentle exercise in the pool, you will be made very welcome. The cost is £6 and transport is available, although limited. All members are very welcoming to join.
There will be no yoga until the new year due to volunteer unavailability.
Coffee and chat is on Wednesday, starting at 10 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. The cost is £2 to include drinks and cake. Staff are on hand to help with any queries and to demonstrate equipment. Laura and Lisa from St Mary's Eye Department will be joining us.
Mix and Mingle is on Thursday at Millbrook House. We have a waiting list for this group, but if you are interested, please call the office to put your name down.
Our next Hearing Cafe is on Monday the 10th of November at Busy Bee Garden Centre between 10:30 and 12 p.m. All very welcome.
The Bargeman's Rest in Newport are holding a charity quiz in aid of us, Sight for White, on Wednesday, November the 12th, starting at 7:30 p.m. The cost is £3 per person, with teams of between 2 and 6 people per table. If you would like to take part, please call the Bargemans on 525 828 or email info@bargemansrest.com to book a table. Please go along and have some food and fun.
Our annual Christmas raffle is underway, and we thank everyone who has already returned their raffle tickets. Prizes are arriving at Millbrook House, but we are always grateful of any prizes anyone wishes to donate. If you would also like more tickets, please do not hesitate to call the office and we can send more books out in the post. The draw takes place on December the 10th during our festive morning.
Our Christmas cards are also available, selling fast this year with several designs already being sold out. They are only £3.50 for packs of 10, so once again, please call the office if you wish to order.
The deadline date for last orders for calendars and diaries is fast approaching, so please call the office and place yours if you require one.
This is Alison, reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio entitled NHS Announces 48% Boost in Isle of Wight Dental Services for 2026. The NHS has confirmed a major increase in dental services on the Isle of Wight next year, with a 48% rise in activity expected. In a report submitted to the County Hall Adult Social Care, Public Health and Housing Needs Committee, NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight outlined plans to introduce significant new additional contracts across the region. Currently, access to dental care on the island is below national averages, with only 40% of children and 23% of adults having seen an NHS dentist in the past year, according to Isle of Wight Council figures. The committee will review NHS dental service provision at their meeting on Thursday, October the 30th. The NHS report states, significant new additional contracts are being put in place across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, both on a permanent and temporary basis. While we appreciate that not all of these improvements will be felt by everyone, we are now able to take further steps, and an additional 84,000 units of dental activity, UDA, will be rolled out at practices across the island throughout 2026. As part of this, 2 new practices will be opened under these contracts, including one in Ryde, expected later this year. The current UDAs commissioned for this financial year on the Isle of Wight is 174,162. An additional 84,000 represents a 48% increase in NHS dental activity once these contracts take effect. Committee members will discuss current levels of access to NHS dental services, measures taken to address the shortage of local NHS dentists, the impact of practice closures, and ongoing efforts to recruit and retain dental professionals on the island.
Reading from Isle of Wight Radio by Howard is concerned with Remembrance Sunday. In honour of Remembrance Sunday, that's the 8th of November, and Remembrance Day, 11th of November, Red Funnel is offering free foot passenger ferry travel for all past and present members of the UK Armed Forces. The offer applies across Red Funnel's entire fleet for travel on Saturday 8th, Sunday 9th, and Tuesday 11th of November to and from the Isle of Wight. To claim the free travel, passengers simply need to visit a Red Funnel ticket office and present one of the following: a MOD Form 90 ID card, including expired cards for veterans, a UK Armed Forces Veteran ID card, a Veterans Rail card, or a Defence Discount card. Fran Collins, CEO of Red Funnel, said, "Remembrance Day gives us a chance to come together as a nation and honour all who have served and those continuing to do so. We hold immense respect for the commitment and sacrifices made by our armed forces, and this small gesture is a token of our gratitude. As a mark of respect, we will also be observing a minute's silence across all our vessels to honour their extraordinary service, with poppies available for passengers to collect at all terminals until 11th of November.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled Critically Endangered Spider Rediscovered on the Isle of Wight After 40 Years. A critically endangered wolf spider, unseen in Britain for 4 decades, has been rediscovered on the Isle of Wight, in what experts are calling one of the most remarkable species recoveries in recent memory. The tiny orange-legged arachnid, Orlonia albimana, was last recorded in the UK in 1985, but has now been found at the National Trust's Newtown National Nature Reserve. The rediscovery is being hailed as a major conservation success for the National Trust, whose ongoing habitat work at Newtown forms part of Natural England's Species Recovery Programme, a targeted effort to protect some of England's most endangered wildlife. The spider, now informally dubbed the white-knuckled wolf spider due to the pale knuckles on its palps and the dramatic timing of its rediscovery, was spotted this autumn by entomologists Mark Telfer and Graham Lyons. It was found approximately 2 kilometres from the spider's previously known colony. This marks the first time the species has ever been digitally photographed in the UK. Mark Telfer, who led the survey, has said, "This is one of those unforgettable discoveries. To find a species thought lost for 40 years is thrilling and testament to how the right habitat management, combined with curiosity and collaboration, can deliver remarkable results." Graham Lyons added, "I suggested calling it the white-knuckled wolf spider because this was probably the longest long shot I've ever taken part in. We had just 4 hours at the site where this spider was last seen 40 years ago, before our boat came to pick us up. I found the first one with just 9 minutes to go, and the second one in the last minute. I've seen 559 species of spider in the British Isles, and this one was by far the most exciting find. The species was discovered in a remote section of the reserve, accessible only by boat. Once overgrown, the area has been carefully restored with the help of grazing Hebridean sheep, which keep the vegetation low, creating ideal conditions for the spider to thrive. Paul Davis, countryside manager for the National Trust on the Isle of Wight, said, "We've been managing this rare limestone grassland for years to encourage a rich diversity of wildlife. To see that work paying off with the return of a species this rare is incredibly rewarding." The British Arachnological Society described the find as epic. Dr. Helen Smith, Conservation Officer for the Society, said, "The remarkable discovery of this dapper little spider on the Isle of Wight is one of Britain's epic lost species rediscoveries of the century. With repeated failure to find it at its former sites, where its open habitat has been lost, it seemed increasingly likely that it had joined the countryside's sad list of extinct species."
Reading by Howard from the Island Echo is concerned with island roads closures. Yarmouth Bridge will be closed for a day in November for inspection and maintenance work. The work by Island Roads is scheduled to take place on Monday, 10th of November. Because a cherry picker will be used to inspect components at the top of the bridge, calm weather is required, and so Tuesday 11th of November and Wednesday 12th of November have been set aside as alternative dates if it's too windy on the target date. Island Roads will also use the closure to undertake other maintenance work on the structure. The usual diversion will be in place via Wilmingham Lane and the Middle Road during the closure. Yarmouth Harbour Commissioners have been informed, and high-masted river traffic is advised to undertake any necessary travel that involves a bridge opening outside of work hours, as any other movements will only be accommodated if possible. Pedestrian access will be maintained during work. Updates on the progress of work will be issued to the local media and via Island Roads X feed.
This is the second part of the Talking News, read by Sam
And Valerie.
We begin with more news items taken from the County Press and the Observer, starting with an article headlined "Inquest into Violent Murder to be held behind closed doors." The Isle of Wight coroner has decided that one of the island's most high-profile and troubling murder cases in recent memory isn't in the public interest. The inquest into the death of Scott Cooper is to be held in private, with journalists and members of the public barred. Mr. Cooper, 33, was found dead on January the 4th, 2022, in the shower cubicle of Piers Carl Brazier's flat on George Street in Ryde. He had suffered more than 20 injuries, including 3 stab wounds to the neck, one of which was deemed rapidly fatal. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary attended Mr. Brazier's flat twice on the day of the incident. The first visit, at around 2:50 a.m, was in response to a domestic disturbance, but officers did not search behind the closed shower curtain. When police returned at 12:48 p.m, Mr. Cooper's body was discovered. The force referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct, which looked into the handling of the incident. 3 members of police staff from the Contact Management Centre received Practice Requiring Improve, PRI, a measure used to address performance issues that falls short of misconduct. A murder investigation followed, and Mr. Brazier was charged. After 2 trials, including the first murder trial on the island since the Crown Court in Newport opened in 1993, he was acquitted. Mr. Brazier died of a heroin overdose just months later. Now the island's coroner, Caroline Summeray, has listed Mr. Cooper's inquest under Section 9C, a legal provision that allows inquests to be completed in writing. Section 9C powers are typically reserved for cases where the facts are clear, the cause of death is undisputed, and a public hearing is deemed unnecessary. The use of Section 9C in Mr. Cooper's case, marked by serious violence, a murder trial, a police referral, and no conviction, is highly unusual. No one has ever been convicted in relation to the death of Mr. Cooper. The county press recently called for the sunlight of transparency to be shone on the coroner's office after so many cases were heard via the 9C legal loophole. County Press editor Laurie Little said, "We have already raised the alarm over the number of inquests that have been heard behind closed doors on the island, but this one is arguably the most serious. 2 murder trials following Mr. Cooper's death, and now no public inquest despite all the unanswered questions after all this time." The County Press has contacted the Isle of Wight Coroner's Office for a statement.
6 students embark on medical placements. 6 students from the south of England's first branch medical degree have started clinical placements in Ryde. The students are part of King's College London's KCL Graduate Entry Medical Programme, which is delivered at the University of Portsmouth. The course was launched in August last year to tackle the severe shortage of doctors in the region. The programme, which is within the University of Portsmouth's Faculty of Science and Health, was developed by the University of Portsmouth in partnership with local NHS Trust and community health partners. Upon completion, graduates will be awarded a KCL Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery degree, MBBS, and will be equipped to work as doctors in the region until and beyond. The course enrolled 54 students in 2024 and has expanded to 67 students at Portsmouth this year. They are given hands-on experience with patients from the start of their training through placements in GP surgeries and community settings across Hampshire and now on the Isle of Wight. Professor Richard Thirlwell, Executive Dean for the faculty, said, "By embedding medical education within communities in places like the Isle of Wight, the degree aims not only to provide students with comprehensive clinical experience, but also to encourage them to establish their careers locally, helping to secure the future GP workforce for areas where doctors are most needed." The medical degree was set up in direct response to the severe shortage of GPs in Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. The region's hospitals have many workforce gaps, and it is one of the worst in the UK, for a shortfall in the number of doctors per patient, with 2,500 people per GP. Dr. Jim Riches, GP, co-lead for the Portsmouth branch of the medical degree, added, "The programme's expansion to include Isle of Wight placements demonstrates the shared commitment between the city and the island to train and retain doctors in undeserved areas." Meanwhile, Hover Travel, which runs journeys to and from the island from Portsmouth, is helping to support the placements by providing discounted tickets for the medical students. Loretta Lale, Head of Marketing and Digital Development at Hover Travel, said, "By helping these future doctors travel easily and quickly between Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight, we're proud to play a small part in strengthening the region's medical workforce."
Honour for Life-Saving Rookie PC. A student police officer who saved a child's life just 3 weeks into the job has been honoured at an awards ceremony. Student officer Josh Pearce received an Area Commander's certificate at the Isle of Wight Area Commanders Awards, held at Newport Congregational Church on October the 21st. Josh was recognised for his quick thinking and composure when providing first aid to an unresponsive child. Only 3 weeks into his service as a response officer, the ceremony heard his calm and considered response in a highly challenging situation ensured the child received the appropriate care. The child was taken to hospital and spent a night under observation before being discharged. Superintendent Rob Mitchell, Isle of Wight Area Commander, said, "I am always impressed by the courage and compassion of police officers, police staff, and members of public across the island. We celebrate officers and staff who have dedicated service to the public and policing as a whole. We also recognise the members of our force and the wider community who have gone above and beyond what we as leaders would expect of them, saving lives and putting their own selves at risk to look after vulnerable members of the public." Contact Inquiry Officers Chris Cragg and Gemma Phillips, along with Police Staff Investigator Mike Dowden, were commended for their professionalism during the evacuation of Newport Town Centre during a live ordnance incident. PC Jack Evans was honoured for his work supporting vulnerable victims in a neighbour dispute, and members of the public, Louise Hodgkins and Anthony Phillips, were also recognised for assisting officers at the scene of a road traffic collision. Chief Constable Alexis Boone said, "Well done and congratulations to all those recognised."
Sentencing for drug driver caught with a truncheon by police. A drug driver who pulled over in the early hours to ask police if everything was all right, only to be caught with cocaine and a wooden truncheon in his car, has been sentenced. Charlie Hill of Queen's Court, East Cowes, appeared before the Isle of Wight magistrates earlier in October. At a previous hearing in August, the 48-year-old admitted 2 counts of drug driving, possession of a Class A drug, namely cocaine, and possession of an offensive weapon in a public place. At that hearing, Prosecutor Leah Dillon said police were on patrol at about 2:50 a.m. on Highfield Road in Ryde on February the 28th. A white Vauxhall Corsa, driving slowly, pulled up alongside police and asked officers if everything was okay, reportedly slurring his words, the court heard. Miss Dillon said police gave Hill a drug wipe test which came back positive for cocaine. Upon searching Hill, officers discovered 2 bags of white powder, later confirmed to be cocaine, and inside the passenger door of his car, a wooden truncheon. And at the police station, a blood test confirmed that Hill was more than 4 times over the specified drug driving limit for cocaine and 8 times over the BZE limit, a derivative of cocaine. Nick Muir, defending, said his client had not been in a good place at the time, suffering from mental health issues and extreme paranoia. Mr. Muir told magistrates the wooden truncheon was part of Hill's fishing equipment and he had placed it in his car because he was convinced he was about to be attacked. Since the offence, Hill has been diagnosed with multiple medical conditions, the court heard. Hill was fined £120 and made subject to a 12-month community order to include 20 rehabilitation days. He was disqualified from driving for 17 months and ordered to pay costs of £85 and a £114 surcharge. See County Press isleofwight.co.uk for more court stories. For results from the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court, see are in the docs section.
Sea level may rise by a metre. The sea level is likely to be about a metre higher in around 80 years' time, the Environment Agency, EA, has told the Isle of Wight Council. Flooding in Ryde in 2023 followed an exceptional rainfall event, but there will be ever-increasing pressures on defences amid climate change impacts, the EA's John O'Flynn said at County Hall last Thursday. The EA Operations Manager responded to concerns over shifting weather patterns voiced by Environment and Community Protection Committee Vice Chair Councillor Ed Blake during a discussion on the devastating flooding 2 years ago. Over 100 properties were flooded in Ryde's Monkton Mead area on October the 25th following Storm Babette. Addressing Mr O'Flynn, Councillor Blake said climate change was creating heavier and more localised downpours. The Conservative group leader expressed disquiet over the level of climate change that we are seeing. He said, "A big factor in flooding, particularly in the Ryde area, is the tidal conditions. On that day, there were not exceptional tidal conditions at all, in fact, very much far from it. The bulk of the rain actually came at low tide, when the tide gave the opportunity for as maximum amount of water as possible to vacate the area. And the fact that this wasn't a tidal storm is more worrying because it shows this isn't an exceptional circumstance at all. This is quite a commonplace, potentially set of circumstances. Are you, as an environment agency, more aware of the fact that this isn't an exceptional circumstance, and, if things aren't handled better in the future, this incident will happen repeatedly?" Mr O'Flynn answered, "I do disagree that it wasn't exceptional. The rainfall that we had on the evening of the 24th was more rain than you've seen on the Isle of Wight for over 75 years. It genuinely was an exceptional event. In terms of climate change and the ever-increasing pressure on defences, you're absolutely right. That is something we are very aware of, but we try to incorporate climate change impacts. The tidal schemes we recognise that in probably about 80 years, the expectation is the sea level will be about a metre higher. So, we incorporate that into designs."
252 police not properly vetted. Hundreds of people working for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary were not properly vetted at the time of a recent inspection. Months after being told its officer and staff vetting requires improvement, the police force said it is recruiting relevant personnel and introducing automated technology. Vetting for 252 employees of the constabulary had expired when it was inspected by Its Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. Inspectors documented their findings in a report into the effectiveness of integrity arrangements at the force published in May. Their vetting concerns included the constabulary's force vetting unit, FVU, having insufficient staff to meet demand, and the constabulary failing to manage its process for high X-level management vetting, MV, effectively. MV is required by people working in more sensitive roles. Analysts were processing 223 vetting applications at the time of the inspection, and a further 462 applications were waiting to be dealt with. The FVU had also failed to ask 293 people with expired recruitment vetting to submit renewal forms. Inspectors said the constabulary told us There were 313 personnel who don't hold current vetting or the correct level of vetting. At the time of our inspection, there were 252 people whose vetting had expired. This means they didn't hold a valid vetting clearance. Of course, 49 were in posts designated for a higher level of vetting, MV. A further 61 were in designated posts, but had never been cleared to that level. Designated posts are those which require vetting when the role involves working closely with vulnerable people. The inspectorate gave the constabulary adequate ratings for upholding the standards of professional behaviour and tackling potential corruption. A constabulary spokesman said, "We have already identified and responded to the challenges around our vetting arrangements, particularly around ensuring we had sufficient resources to meet demand. We were pleased that the report recognised our efforts to increase capacity within the team, and we have recruited a further 12 staff since the inspection. We've since added a further post. We have also introduced automatic technology for appropriate tasks to help boost efficiency. We're already seeing the results of this continued investment, with the time it takes to complete vetting continuing to reduce, which will allow us to prioritise office recruitment to meet the needs of our communities."
Future of iconic festival secured for years to come. The future of the Isle of Wight Festival at Seaclose Park has been secured into the 2030s. County Hall's Environment and Community Protection Committee voted for a recommendation to agree terms on a 7-year extension to the event's land licence. The extension covers the period 2026 to 2033 and includes a further 3-year option for an extension up to and including 2036. The committee delegated authority to the Strategic Director for Community Services to conclude the details of the Isle of Wight Festival licence. The licence between the Isle of Wight Festival and County Hall was Cabinet approved in 2023 and includes environmental obligations to protect the festival area and promote sustainable practices, according to a council officer's report. The festival cannot cause damage to trees inside the festival area and is required to manage the total removal of litter, waste, and any equipment or materials brought into the area, to be completed before the festival period finishes. There is also a compulsory restoration process after each festival, with joint inspections involving the Isle of Wight Festival and the Council before and following the festival period to evaluate ground conditions. The Council Officer's report said, "The Isle of Wight Festival is considered to have had a major economic benefit to the island. It provides worldwide profile for the island as both a tourism destination and place to invest which, if lost, would be difficult to replicate. The event is estimated to be worth over £15 million a year to the island economy and introduces a new demographic of visitors to the island, many of whom will then continue to return both as festival goers but also long-term visitors with their families, friends and relatives. Whilst the staging of the Isle of Wight Festival is not necessarily supported by everyone, any adverse impacts on the local community have been mitigated over the years, and a new long-term relationship will ensure these plans will continue to be delivered and refreshed when necessary to ensure it continues to be a great event which benefits us all."
A community radio station is honoured at awards. The Isle of Wight community station, Vectis Radio, took home 4 awards at a national ceremony. The island's broadcasters won big at the Community Radio Awards in Bradford on Saturday, October the 25th. Vectis Radio won Gold Awards in celebrating and championing the Community Radio of the Year and Community Impact Project of the Year for the 4Ps Radio Training School. The station also won a Silver Award for Specialist Content Show of the Year, Mid-Morning Show and Bronze in Station of the Year. Vectis radio station manager Ian Mack said, "It's a wonderful achievement, but none of it would be possible without the incredible young people who take part in the course. Their success is what drives us, and without the outstanding support of our funders, the Isle of Wight Council, the Isle of Wight Foundation and SNG, these opportunities simply would not exist." The station has received plaudits from across the island, including the Isle of Wight Council leader Phil Jordan, Council Chair Ian Dorr, and Rob Gillespie, Chair of the Isle of Wight Foundation Board of Trustees.
Your say on budget spending. Residents and organisations have until Monday, November the 3rd, to share views on the Isle of Wight Council's budget. Hundreds of millions of pounds of spending each year. County Hall's consultation for the 2026-2027 financial year invites islanders to answer questions on issues such as council tax, how the local authority's spending should be prioritised, and charges for council-run services. The Unitary Authority spends around £500 million annually on public service provision and must ensure its income and expenditure are balanced. Priorities that can be ranked in the survey include improving the road network, building new homes on the island, investing in cultural projects, and schools and specialist provision for children with additional needs. Alliance Council leader Phil Jordan said, "We spend lots of money each year on delivering our services, and you may have your ideas about what's more important or less important, or what we should do and shouldn't do. We'd like to hear from you very, very firmly what you want us to do." The consultation can be accessed online at www.iow.gov.uk.
A glass corridor plan revealed at the Botanic Garden. Ventnor Botanic Garden has sought planning permission for a new glass corridor and additional toilet facility. The project would improve the site's retail operation, enhance the venue for events, and help in the day-to-day operation of the garden, according to a submitted planning statement. It says, using design and sympathetic materials and copying like for like, the proposal is for construction of a connecting link between two shop buildings, effectively reinstating what was a glass corridor tunnel at handover from the Isle of Wight Council in 2012. The proposals would link the shop and gallery with a small extension to create a single retail operation. In addition, the shop would be extended to provide a set of public toilets on the south side of the shop, between the shop and the main building. The provision of new toilets would improve the facilities available to visitors and for customers of the cafe. Importantly, the gallery is currently unmanned, and by creating the link, all visitors to the shop and gallery would need to pass through the shop, allowing staff to be on hand to aid our customers.
Almost 10% of care homes not good enough. Almost 10% of registered island care homes are rated inadequate or requires improvement by a national watchdog. One institution in Sandown, Autumn House Residential Home, is inadequate, and 5 others in Ryde, Bembridge and Ventnor require improvement, according to the Care Quality Commission, CQC. Those requiring improvement include Ryde's Highfield House Nursing Home and 22 Argyle Street. Inverhouse and the Elms Care Home in Bembridge, and the Burnhill Grove Registered Care Home in Ventnor. Empowering Islanders Group Leader Councillor Chris Jarman, who serves on County Hall's Adult Social Care, Public Health and Housing Needs Committee, described the CQC's findings as very concerning. He said they reflect a national systemic failure of residential provision in the UK, which is teetering on the edge of collapse. Councillor Jarman said, "A nation's care for its elderly is often judged by how it supports their independence, dignity and quality of life through a combination of strong social support, accessible healthcare and inclusive community structures. With its particularly aged demographics, the Isle of Wight experiences one of the most acute pressures on both funding, places and staffing. We have been aware for several years that the Office for National Statistics forecast is for our population profile to continue skewing towards an increasingly aged population, with many having multiple health conditions. It is essential and long overdue that provision is urgently made for new, much larger care facilities at every level to ensure economies of scale and staffing. Our exceptional circumstances must be recognised by central government with substantial additional adult social care funding to support families and elderly in their own homes, supported care facilities such as Green Meadows in Colwell, and quality care and nursing homes for those in greatest need." The Chair and Vice Chair of the Adult Social Care, Public Health and Housing Needs Committee, Councillor Claire Mosdale, Independent, and Sarah Redrup, Liberal Democrat, issued a joint statement. They said, "The Isle of Wight Council works closely with all providers to ensure the quality of service and provision is of good quality and meets the needs and expectations of those who use them and their families, with the vast majority of services rated good or outstanding. Where the provision of service is identified as not meeting that expectation, we require those providers to develop an improvement plan. We work closely with both the CQC and local providers to ensure delivery of the improvement plan and to monitor progress. Where the required improvements are not delivered, we consider formal action."
Flood fear over 127 home plan by Rufus Pickles. A 127 home development proposal in Freshwater has resurfaced in revised form. Tallulah Estates has lodged an outline application with County Hall for a housing estate next to Camp Road. The plans include access roads, biodiversity net gain provision and landscaping. In November 2024, the Isle of Wight Council's Planning Committee voted against a 127 home scheme off Camp Road as part of a different application. The refusal was due to inadequate and deficient information relating to surface water drainage and impacts on environmentally protected areas and surveys of protected bat species. New homes for the revised proposal will be 35% affordable and designed to a high quality standard with a range of unit types and sizes according to the Andrew White Planning Consultancy. However, an Isle of Wight councillor has slammed the plans, saying the development will increase exposure to flood and pollution risks for current and future generations. Councillor Becca Cameron, the Empowering Islanders Group representative for Freshwater South, declared her opposition to the outline application. Councillor Cameron said, "Freshwater sits in a natural bowl and already faces regular flood risk when heavy rain meets a high tide. local pumping stations struggle, leading to sewage spills into Afton Marsh, the Causeway and the Western Yar, part of an internationally protected Ramsar site. This will only get worse with climate change. The Camp Road field is valuable agricultural land and a habitat that buffers floods and supports biodiversity. Building here would increase peak runoff and reduce natural floodplain storage while adding phosphorus and nitrate loads to sensitive water bodies. GP access, school places and drainage are already under pressure. This scheme adds demand without delivering the genuinely affordable homes our community needs. She added, the urban development was not right for Freshwater and would dilute its appeal as a stunning heritage tourist destination, leading to economic setback. Councillor Cameron, who was elected to County Hall in May by-election, said, the people of Freshwater had stood up to fight to protect our beautiful area before it is destroyed forever. She told the local Democracy Reporting Service at the time, people visit the West Wight for its beauty, its open spaces, for its inspiration, its nature, peace and tranquility, not to see mass housing developments and government is forcing upon us. The Andrew White Planning Consultancy statement supporting Tallulah Estates bid said there was an undeniable need for both market and affordable housing. This outline application seeks to deliver 127 homes and associated infrastructure, making a significant contribution to housing supply within a large, thriving village environment. Failing to support this application would be a failure of the requirement to provide the right housing in the right location to support the current and future generations of the local community. The proposal can provide an attractive, functional and accessible environment that contributes to the sense of place. Consultation on Proposal 25/01505/OUT closes on November the 28th and a decision is due on January the 23rd.
Duo hooked on Valium are sentenced for shoplifting. Two shoplifters who stole hundreds of pounds worth of items from various stores while battling a dependency on Valium have been sentenced. Newport's Lily Nash and Thomas Mason, of Atkinson Drive and Staplers Road respectively, appeared before Isle of Wight magistrates on Tuesday, October the 28th. Nash, 25, admitted 2 counts of theft from a shop in Newport between September the 2nd and 3rd. The court heard she stole £27.25 worth of food and alcohol from Tesco and, jointly with Mason, stole £748.99 worth of clothing from Sports Direct. Mason, 29, admitted 3 counts of theft from a shop in Newport between August the 31st and September the 3rd. As well as the joint charge, the court heard that Mason stole a Babyliss air styler from Boots valued at £75 and a Bose speaker valued at £229.95 from Currys. Prosecutor Lauren McConnell said the total value of the stolen goods amounted to £776.24 for Nash and £1,053.94 for Mason. She said the pair had already been made subject of community orders at the time of the offences. Oscar Vincent, defending, said the offending stemmed from the pair developing a dependency on non-prescription medication, primarily Valium. He said they were supporting each other, desperately keen to address it, and both acknowledged the need for outside professional help. Mr. Vincent said the pair were in receipt of state benefits, and some of the stolen items were recovered following a search of Mason's address. Nash, who has 12 previous convictions for 27 offences, was made subject of a fresh 12-month community order to include 15 rehabilitation days and a 12-month drug rehabilitation requirement. She was ordered to pay £403.74 compensation, costs of £42.50 and a £114 surcharge. Mason, who has 11 previous convictions for 17 offences, was handed a fresh 18-month community order to include 120 hours of unpaid work, 15 rehabilitation days, and a 12-month drug rehabilitation requirement. He was ordered to pay £679.44 compensation, costs of £42.50 and a £114 surcharge. The presiding magistrate told the pair, "You now have the opportunity to try to get off the drugs. If it escalates further, you can guess what the next stage is."
A plan to replace the lifeboat station. Plans to replace a lifeboat station deemed no longer fit for purpose have received backing from Sandown Town Council. In a letter to County Hall supporting the proposal, the local authority said the proposed replacement of Sandown and Shanklin Independent Lifeboat is sympathetic to the local character and coastal setting. Sandown and Shanklin Independent Lifeboat has sought planning permission to demolish the existing station on Sandown's western esplanade. The island charity is run by volunteers and has served the Isle of Wight's coast for decades, according to a planning statement. It proposes to build a new and resilient 2-storey station in place of the existing structure. As Sandown Town Council spokesman said, the Town Council discussed this application at its recent meeting and fully supports the application. The lifeboat station will enhance maritime safety and emergency response capabilities. As climate change increases the frequency of extreme weather events, the station needs to be robust and able to withstand storms, as damage can lead to interruptions to service. Consultation on application 25/01441/FUL finishes on November the 7th, and a decision has been scheduled for November the 26th.
Tracks trespasser avoids jail due to his mental health. A recovering alcoholic who trespassed onto a live railway line while carrying a knife has been spared jail after it emerged he had been discharged too early from a mental health unit. Jonathan Weaver of Avenue Road, Sandown, appeared for sentencing at Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on Friday, October the 24th. He had previously admitted possessing a knife in public and trespassing on a railway line in Ryde on July the 16th. Police were called to Ryde Esplanade Station at around 6:30 a.m, where Weaver was armed with a knife. He ignored officers and walked onto the railway tracks toward Ryde Pierhead, prompting authorities to shut down the power supply, said Serena Edwards, prosecuting. Around 100 passengers were left stranded at Ryde Esplanade Station. Officers eventually arrested Weaver, who told them he was having a bad week. He had a previous conviction for a knife offence in 2015. For Weaver, Michael McGoldrick said his client's action stemmed from exceptional circumstances. He had been discharged too early from 7 Acres mental health unit in Newport and was in a severely unwell state. Walking on the tracks was the biggest cry for help you could imagine, Mr. McGoldrick said. Weaver, who has battled alcoholism for 21 years, told the court he had no intention of harming anyone but himself. He apologised to the court and the British Transport Police, saying drink had taken its toll. Mr McGoldrick persuaded the bench not to imprison Weaver due to him having not reoffended in 10 years, being in poor health, and that there was no evidence he had produced a knife or threatened to use it. Magistrates accepted that Weaver posed a low risk of reoffending and acknowledged his efforts to engage with Alcoholics Anonymous. He was handed an 18-month probation order, including a year of alcohol treatment, and ordered to pay a £120 fine, £85 in costs, and a £114 surcharge. The bench warned Weaver he had come very close to going to prison.
Minister meets MP over ferry issues. The new Maritime Minister has now met with both Isle of Wight MPs to discuss the ferries. Joe Robertson, MP for Isle of Wight East, met with Keith Mather, MP, this week, following a separate meeting between the Minister and Isle of Wight West MP Richard Quigley last week. Mr Robertson said it was to keep the case for ferry regulation firmly on the table as part of ongoing negotiations with government, and said he was working cross-party on the issue with Mr Quigley. Mr Robertson said, "I am confident that the new minister understands the problem, that we are only part of the UK completely beholden to unregulated private equity firms for essential travel. We are asking to be taken out of this uniquely unfair treatment, which has led to astronomical prices, dwindling timetables and unreliable services. If the Department for Transport does not want to administer new ferry regulations, the government can instead hand powers to the new mayor for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. I have tabled an amendment to the English Devolution Bill for that purpose too." He said government cannot do nothing with our ferry problem while it is intervening in trains, buses and other essential transport nationally.
Union warning at slow fire service. A union has warned that the fire service is close to being unable to keep the community safe, following the major fire at Sandown's Signet Hotel on October the 18th. 5 fire engines had to be ferried across the Solent to the Isle of Wight to provide cover as a slow and scrambled response to the blaze unfolded. The emergency saw a scrap heap challenge approach to running a fire service, with firefighters forced to scrape together resources, Dave Hunt of the Fire Brigade Union's FBU said. It shows how close the fire service is to being unable to keep the community safe, and must be a wake-up call, the FBU said. However, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service, HIWFRS, said moving fire engines to provide fire cover to an area where local resources are responding to a large incident is standard practice for UK fire services. HIWFRS said all required resources for the incident, apart from 1 fire engine, were from island stations. The union said the service was unable to initially send the right number of fire engines, 3, due to the poor availability of appliances on the island. Instead, it initially sent 2, leaving just 2 fire engines available to cover the whole of the island. The service was also unable to provide a second aerial ladder platform, again due to a lack of firefighters. When the second did eventually respond, it was only possible because it called on retained firefighters and used oncoming night shift firefighters on overtime to piece together a crew. Dave Hunt, Brigade Secretary for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, said there are supposed to be 11 fire engines on the Isle of Wight, but due to cuts, most of these sit empty. We are now facing yet more cuts to firefighter numbers. That will make things even worse. Rob Cole, Assistant Chief Fire Officer at HIWFRS, said, on receiving the first 999 call, 2 fire engines and an aerial ladder platform were mobilised to the incident immediately, with the first fire engine arriving at the scene in 7 minutes 54 seconds. 5 minutes after the initial call, a third fire engine was mobilised as repeat calls were received. Once firefighters were on the scene and had assessed the scale and nature of the incident, resources were increased to 6 fire engines, alongside 2 water carriers and 2 aerial ladder platforms. We acknowledge the FBU's concerns about government funding, as the cost of delivering our vital services has surpassed the funding we receive. We are collaborating with the National Fire Chiefs Council to advocate for increased funding from government.
Triathlete triumphs at World Contest. An Ireland triathlete has triumphed at the World Championships in Australia. White Tri's Helen Scholes took part in the World Triathlon Age Group Sprint Distance Championships in Wollongong, Australia, on October the 17th. The course, which was compact and allowed for constant crowd support, included a chaotic M-shaped swim in the harbour, a bike leg with zigzags, steep climbs, fast flats and a run circling a lighthouse 3 times. Despite the challenges, Helen finished with a time of 01.24.36. She placed 25th out of 56 overall, second out of 5 GB athletes, and just behind an ex-Olympic silver medalist. The best moment for the triathlete, however, was when her daughter, who had flown in overnight, surprised her as she was setting up her transition area. Helen is now preparing for winter training and moving up to the 60 to 64 age group. Reflecting on the event, Helen described the swim as an aquatic mosh pit, and while she did get mildly mauled at the boys, she managed to transition smoothly.
And now moving on to the second section, White Memories and Nostalgia, starting with Days Gone By. 125 years ago, in November 1900, a Newport man wrote to the county press to respond to a question in an earlier edition asking, "Was a meteor seen on the island?" "Yes," replied Mr. Law, who said that while travelling home from Haven Street with his family on the evening in question, he saw a large meteor, which he described as looking like an electric light with a long tail, descending towards the mainland.
Council to probe island pharmacy closures as NHS faces questions. From the Island Echo. The Isle of Wight pharmacy closures, which have left many residents unable to access essential medications, are due to be discussed at County Hall tonight. That was Thursday. The Adult Social Care, Public Health and Housing Needs Committee will consider recent serious challenges faced by the island's pharmacy services and an update submission on the situation from the NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight. In September, Healthwatch Isle of Wight said issues with pharmacies, including short notice closures, low stock levels and limited availability, were causing distress and inconvenience, particularly for those with ongoing health conditions. A paper published in advance of the committee meeting on Thursday said pharmacy services on the Isle of Wight have recently faced serious challenges, particularly due to unexpected closures of several J Hoots pharmacy branches across the island. These closures are often occurring without notice, have left many residents unable to access essential medications, causing distress and inconvenience, especially for those with limited mobility or urgent health needs. Other local pharmacies have struggled to absorb the increased demand, and the lack of clear communication has further complicated the situation. The ICB is working to address these issues, but concerns remain about the resilience and reliability of the pharmacy provision on the island. NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight submission says the Integrated Care Board meets weekly with a JHOOTS representative for the South East. In the summer, reports were made by members of the public and local representatives of the issues accessing medicines from JHOOTS pharmacies. There are 5 JHOOT pharmacies across the Isle of Wight. NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight meets weekly with a JHOOTS representative for the South East and are aware of these reports. While the exact details remain confidential, action has been taken previously, and the ICB remains prepared to do so where needed in the future if contracted requirements are not met. No official notice has been given as to any planned closure of these pharmacies. JHOOTS has been contacted for a comment. Days gone by. 100 years ago in October 1925, a 14-year-old Ryde newsboy was remanded to the workhouse on a charge of stealing 6 fountain pens and 1 propelling pencil from the premises of A. H. Osborne of Union Street, Ryde. A scheme to provide good music and poetry in rural areas was being started on the island. A party of 4 first-class artists toured the island's villages in connection and provided a wealth of performances to widen island's musical appreciation.
75 years ago, in November 1950, a Cowes to Southampton boat was held up when the first fog of the autumn interfered considerably with Solent shipping movements. Thanks to radar, boats on the Ryde to Portsmouth route continued running. Stead and Simpson Limited made an appeal against the County Council after they were refused permission to rebuild their war-damaged Cowes premises. The shoe shop was keen to comply with any reasonable scheme by the planning authority for the reconstruction of the High Street site, but the County Council insisted that there was not enough demand for shoes in the town to justify any rebuild.
50 years ago in November 1975, Southern Vectis placed an advert in the county press apologising for recent price rises. The rises range from 1 penny to 6p and were caused by unprecedented inflation. Newport FC, struggling in the lower reaches of the Hampshire League First Division, were attempting to appoint a new manager. Following the resignation of former player-manager John Sydenham, the team approached Fareham town boss Alan Wilson to fill the vacancy. For more tales of the past, subscribe to our online archive, and when you read the county press editions dating back to 1884. A bus ride down memory lane under the Heritage. In 1923, Reg Davis, aged 14, became a bus conductor with the Vectis Bus Company, better known today as Southern Vectis, and stayed with the company his entire working life. Reg ate, slept and breathed buses and always took a camera with him wherever he went, over the years building up a huge collection of photos and Southern Vectis memorabilia. In 1983, Colin Fairweather and I recorded a 2-hour interview with Reg. He told us, Leonard Dodson was a coach builder from London, and he and his family came here on holiday and found that they couldn't get to certain places. They wanted to go to Osborne, but they had to go by train to Whippingham Station and then walk 4 miles to Osborne House. And they wanted to go to Walham Bay. They went to Freshwater by train, and then they had to get a taxi to Walham Bay or walk. Terrible. So he decided to start a bus company here, and that was in October 1921. I had an interview with Dodson and I started as a conductor that day. When I joined in 1923, they had a garage at Somerton at Cowes and an office in Newport in St James Square. They started off with 4 buses, 29-seaters. That was all they had. We asked Reg what the roads were like then. Oh, he said, terrible. The road to Cowes from the Stag to the Horseshoe was all gravel road with a high hedge either side, and when you went through there it was just like a sandstorm, clouds of dust and dirt. You looked out the back and it was as if you had been through the desert. You stopped anywhere in those days. There was no set pickup at all, and we did hundreds and hundreds of hours. You would think nothing of working from 8 in the morning till finishing at 11 o'clock at night. Oh, it must have run into 80 hours a week or more. It was terrible. But surely Reg got overtime. We never got any overtime, said Reg. It didn't matter what hours you did, but it was a 10 bob a day, which was enormous money. Best job on the island. My goodness, I bought my own house on Horsebridge Hill, and I got married on £3, 10 shillings a week. Despite the long hours, there was time for the odd caper. We used to have some fun and games, said Reg. We played cards at Somerton on Friday nights. The drivers used to lose all their money, all their wages. Les Pritchett was one. He was a proper gambler, he was. I've seen him lose all his pay down there, and he'd go and borrow some money, and the next night he'd win it all back again.
To get home from Somerton at night, we used to have a special bus, the last bus in, which we had permission to use to take us all to Newport. They used to drive this 20-seater bus up to the Horseshoe Inn, and we used to go in there. Of course, in those days, there wasn't a soul on the road after dark at night. Nobody about. Well, the Horseshoe closed at 10 o'clock, and one time a policeman came in. It was about 11:30, and he said, I've got the lot of you now. So, what's it going to be? Am I going to run the lot of you in, or are you going to give me a drink? Of course, naturally he got a drink, and he went out of there pretty staggery. He had an appointment at Baring Road at 1 o'clock in the morning. How he got there, I don't know. One windy October night in 1927, a fire broke out at the Somerton garage. Fanned by the strong wind, it was soon out of control. By the early hours of the morning, the garage, along with 13 buses, was reduced to ashes. I came into Newport the next morning, and they said, "It's no good you going up to Somerton, there aren't any buses." Well, we'd lost 13 buses, mostly new ones. They reckon it was a cigarette that started the fire. The floor of the garage was just a dirt floor caked with petrol and oil droppings. Buses were borrowed from London, and Vexis were able to continue their service until a new fleet arrived. Today, Southern Vexis has gone from 9 buses to over 130. As for Reg, he retired in the 1980s and emigrated to Australia in 1994 to be with his daughter in his later years.
The news from County Hall by Councillor Phil Jordan, leader of the Isle of Wight Council. If running a council was like running a household, we'd all recognise the situation right away. Prices are up, bills are up, and a budget that seems to shrink every month. The Isle of Wight Council is no different, except that our household serves 140,000 people and maintains over 500 miles of road, has hundreds of public buildings and vital services that touch every single life on this island. We're consulting with you, our residents and businesses, on how we continue to deliver the essential services you depend on, while making the sums add up. It's a conversation everyone should be part of. One of our biggest challenges is social care, adults and children's, which now accounts for around 3/4 of our entire council budget. The demand keeps rising as our population ages, and the cost of providing that care increases each year. Nobody disputes that it's money well spent. Caring for our most vulnerable, young and old, is one of the most important things we do. But it does mean less financial flexibility elsewhere. That's why I've been pressing government so hard for a fair funding deal for the Isle of Wight. We're a unitary authority serving an island community, yet we receive the same funding formula as a mainland council with motorways, big urban centres and instant access to neighbouring resources. Ferries are not free, and moving anything on and off our island, goods, people and vehicles, costs real money. It's time that reality was reflected in how we're funded. In the meantime, we're tightening our belts, modernising and restructuring our services and investing wisely to make every pound go further. From digital transformation in customer services and back office support to smarter contracts and energy efficient buildings, we're determined to protect what matters most, the services that support our residents, keep our communities safe and make this island a place we're all proud to call home. So please, take part in the public consultation. You can access it easily via, this is lowercase, iw.observer/budget consultation, or drop us a line at County Hall if you want a paper copy. Tell us your priorities, your ideas, and where you think we should focus our limited resources. Balancing the books isn't easy, but with your help and input and a fairer deal from government, I'm confident we can keep the island strong, caring and financially sound.
October events showcased island farming life by Sian Grove. With the clocks having gone back and the evenings drawing in, we are all faced with a lack of daylight, but the farming doesn't stop. In fact, with the mild weather we've been having, some farmers have been making the most of it, working to drill wheat and other cereal and winter crops, planting the seed directly into the ground before the ground gets too hard from frost or too wet for the tractors. The rain has also meant that the grass has started to grow back, allowing for some late cuttings to replenish winter forage stocks and hopefully ease some of the pressure caused by the dry summer. On Sunday, October the 5th, Warren Farm held its very first open day, and what a great day it was. Becca and James, tenant farmers of the National Trust Farm, threw open the gates and welcomed over 300 visitors to experience life on the farm up close. Families loved meeting the cows and sheep, enjoying tractor rides and watching the milking demonstrations, while little ones got stuck into fun activities. The farm walks and talks gave everyone a chance to explore Headon Warren and West High Down, and of course the delicious roast beef and lamb rolls went down the treat. It was great to see so many people engaging with farming, learning more about where their food comes from and simply enjoying a great day out in the countryside together. The Isle of Wight charity tractor run went ahead on October the 12th and turned out to be a fantastic day. Around 40 tractors took part, setting off from Arreton Barnes and rumbling their way through the island's scenic countryside. The event brought together local farmers, enthusiasts and spectators who enjoyed seeing the colourful and well-maintained vintage tractors on display. Organised by the Vexis Vintage Tractor and Engine Club, the event raised money for the Isle of Wight Prostate Cancer Support Group and brought the community together in true Isle of Wight spirit. For sheep farmers, this time of year also marks the start of tupping season, when rams are introduced to ewes in the hope of a successful spring lambing. Some farmers put raddle, a coloured powder, on the ram's chest, which marks the ewes as they are mounted. So, if you're out in the countryside and spot sheep with colourful bums, it's a hopeful sign they are pregnant. It's a timely reminder for dog owners to keep their pets on the lead around livestock. Pregnant sheep can miscarry if chased, and sadly, this happens far too often. Autumn has brought its own challenges for livestock. This year has seen a bumper crop of acorns, also known as a mast year, and with grass growth limited over the summer, both sheep and cattle have been browsing more than usual. Large quantities of acorns can be poisonous due to tannins, which can damage the gut and kidneys. In severe cases, animals can become dehydrated and unwell very quickly. As we approach Christmas, our young farmers are gearing up their annual Christmas party on November the 29th, an opportunity for club members and the wider farming community to get together and catch up before the busy festive period. Tickets are £30 for the carvery, dessert and disco, and can be purchased online.
Rising star of piano to perform. A rising classical pianist is set to perform at Freshwater Memorial Hall. Amiri Harewood, who is currently balancing postgraduate studies at the Royal College of Music with his concert career, will be playing on Saturday, November the 8th at 7 p.m. as part of West White Arts Association 25 to 26 season. Tickets for the concert can be purchased from westwhitetarts.co.uk or the Totland Parish office on 756028. Harewood's recent solo performances have included St Martin in the Fields and the Royal Albert Hall in London and Conservatorio in Venice and the Mozart Music Festival in Forlì in Italy. His concerto debut at the Royal Festival Hall with Cinecchi Orchestra was met with universal acclaim, with the Financial Times commenting on his confidence and a touch of grandiloquence. He was also recently named a Classic FM Rising Star, featuring on their 30 Under 30 list. In the Memorial Hall concert, Harewood will present an adventurous programme, including works by Shostakovich, George Walker, Granados, Bach and Brahms.
5 firework displays for you to enjoy. Vibrant displays, eye-catching Catherine wheels, and wrapping up warm to brace the November elements. Here are 5 firework nights to celebrate. The 5th of November is upon us, and there are numerous displays across the island to marvel at on or around on that date. Here are a handful of displays that will be worth going along to. The Isle of Wight Community Club, the Cowes venue on Park Road, is hosting its annual event on November the 1st from 8 p.m. with 3 entry. The clubhouse's kitchen will be serving food. Everyone is welcome. The Spyglass Inn, Ventnor, fireworks and live music. What more could you want? The pub on Ventnor Esplanade is also serving seasonal specials to go alongside their display at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, November the 5th. Entry to the pub is free, and the fireworks can be enjoyed from all along the Esplanade. Robin Hill. Mountbatten's firework night is back at Robin Hill Adventure Park on Saturday, November the 8th. Doors open at 2:30 p.m. for a range of entertainment and food, with the display commencing from 7 p.m. Visitors are encouraged to dress up sparkly and bring glow-in-the-dark accessories. The Square, Yarmouth. A torchlight procession marks the start of the West White Town's festivities on November the 5th, making its way from the square, up the High Street and to the Common from 6 p.m. The firework display will start at 7 p.m, with food available from local vendors. Blackgang Chine. The theme park marks the end of the season with a firework display on Saturday, November the 1st. Tickets for the event costs £15.95, and people can under 1 metre and carers go free.
A programme for the Shanklin Theatre on the Isle of Wight, October the 31st, Friday, today, SHLT/Face Shakespeare, Hamlet. Right, November, Saturday the 1st, the Edwin Starr Band. Sunday the 2nd, the Simon and Garfunkel Story, which is apparently a rescheduled date. Thursday the 6th, Kevin Bloody Wilson, The Dillage of Guy, live. Friday the 7th, Hello Again, the Neil Diamond Songbook. Thursday the 13th, Disney, The Little Mermaid. Friday the 14th, Disney, The Little Mermaid. Saturday the 15th, Disney, The Little Mermaid. Sunday the 16th, Disney, The Little Mermaid. Tuesday the 18th, the Imperial Classic Ballet presents Sleeping Beauty. July the 20th, an evening with Harry Redknapp. Friday the 21st, Rave On. Saturday the 22nd, the Shanklin Theatre Tour. Sunday the 23rd, Spotlight Isle of Wight Limited presents Pantomania. Tuesday the 25th, the first act Present Wonderland. Wednesday the 26th, the first act Present Wonderland. Saturday the 29th, Kinky Boots. Saturday the 30th, Kinky Boots.
Island Health Roadshows conclude with final event. Community Action Isle of Wight's series of health roadshows will conclude with a final event on Tuesday, November the 4th at the Riverside Centre, Newport from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Launched in 2023, the roadshows have brought together hundreds of islanders living with long-term and mental health conditions, alongside organisations offering advice, information and peer support. The initiative has been led by Sandy Belfit, Community Action Isle of Wight's Health Partnership Officer, whose own experience of living with a brain injury highlighted the importance of peer-led support. The series is ending as funding for Sandy's role comes to a close. Sandy said, "The roadshows have shown how much can be achieved when community groups, health professionals and the voluntary sector work together." More than 35 local organisations will attend, with a focus on peer-led and community groups supporting those with long-term conditions. Groups include Applegate Breast Cancer Support Group, Irasopia Foundation, Alzheimer Cafe Isle of Wight, Age UK Isle of Wight, the Isle of Wight MS Society, Open Umbrella Cancer Support Group, Veterans Outreach Support, Isle of Wight Brainy Bunch and Wessex Cancer Support Trust. Health and statutory services will also be present, including Isle of Wight NHS Trust teams, screening services, Wessex Cancer Alliance, Smoke 3 Island and Health Watch Isle of Wight. Ferry operators will provide information on travel support for people with long-term health conditions. Although the roadshows are ending, Community Action Isle of Wight will continue to support peer groups across the island. Sandy said, "If anyone would like help setting up a new group, Community Action Isle of Wight is here to help. Groups supporting people with long-term or mental health conditions can contact Sandy Ciccignani at SCIWCOGNANI@actioniw.org.uk.
Letters page. Patients Not All Are Treated Equally by John Sutcliffe in Lake. Thanks to David White, CP Letters 24th of the 10th, for putting into words what many patients feel about the decision of our Shanklin GP practice to put all bookings online. Clearly, this does not treat all patients equally, as there are some, especially the elderly, who do not have and do not want computers or smartphones. They should certainly have the right to make appointments by telephone or in the person. Staff at both Shanklin and Sandown medical centres are extremely kind and helpful, but it seems those in management need to take a closer look at what the NHS asks of them. The online booking system started without any patient consultation and will be a worry for many, and I fear it will lead to some, especially those with no family members around to help them, not seeking appointments when they genuinely need to. The decision should be reversed immediately.
Older people are feeling excluded, by Anna Ellis of Shanklin. Yet another letter of complaint about the system of exclusion of some older people wanting doctor's appointments. We cannot book online. I suppose it frees up appointments for those who can access the system and cuts down the bother of dealing with older people. It will certainly add to the number of 111 and ambulance calls.
Frustrated by early sailing on the late night ferry. Name and address supplied. I am writing to highlight my frustration at the ferries. On Saturday night, October the 25th, the 11:10 p.m. White Link service between Portsmouth and Fishbourne left more than 10 minutes early. Fortunately, on this occasion, I was on this ferry in good time, but considering the next service would have been at 1 a.m, I feel that Whitelink should prioritise running to timetable. I am aware of people who have missed late-night ferries in recent weeks, and I feel this is unnecessary. The CP asked Whitelink for a response. A Whitelink spokesperson said, "Our policy is that vehicle passengers arrive between 30 and 60 minutes and foot passengers 15 minutes before the crossing time. This is all our booking confirmations and on our website. In this instant, the crew left 10 minutes early to navigate around a boat which was adrift on Wootton Creek."
Such kindness made my day, by Ken Abernethy, Calbourne. Sunday morning was my first visit to Dunelm. Overwhelmed by the massive stock, I was guided by a young chap to where I needed to be. I found all the necessary bits and bobs to get my Sailmaker sewing machine back in business. But I had a problem, finding a dark grey cotton to match my trousers. I accosted a lady and daughter who were passing and explained my dilemma. They swept through the mass of colours and handed me 2 perfect matches. They made my day. Thank you very much.
This is all for this week, and it's goodbye from Valerie.
And goodbye from Sam.
The BBC In Touch programme follows, and the Scaffolding News follows that.
Hello. When the RNIB came up with its long-term strategy earlier this year, which had to take account of the need to save several £1 million, one of the major causes of complaint amongst service users was the decision to cut transcribing braille books and documents on request. Particular concern was the effect this would have on the production of braille music scores, a service for which RNIB has an international reputation, and which would affect quite large numbers of visually impaired people who worked in music as performers or teachers, not to mention the people for whom it was a major source of pleasure. Well, after what can only be described as a howl of protest, the decision was reversed, or at least postponed for a year. But it made us wonder what the future held for those who'd relied on this service. Well, we'll concentrate on the music issue in a moment and what the alternatives might be in an uncertain future. But at the time, the RNIB told us they would look at all the options before making a long-term decision. One of those who led the protest to the policy was Connor Scott Gardner, and I asked them why they'd been so outraged at the policy.
Firstly, I would say Braille on Demand is almost impossible to get hold of. The RNIB was the only transcription service nationally in the country providing a level of personal transcription at no cost to the blind user. Really, Braille has always been one of the RNIB's core missions, and so for them to step away from that at a time when Braille literacy and access to Braille is still such a fundamental issue for blind people, it felt like they were abandoning their, I suppose, original group of service users and people who are lifelong service users.
So what's your understanding really of what the position is now?
So when they were first announced, the RNIB essentially said, we're cutting the service completely. There was a protest in response to this. They then connected with a third-party organisation and they signed presumably a contract with them. And so now there has been a year's extension to that. So transcription is not provided in-house. However, until April next year, you can get personal documents transcribed into Braille or audio, which is, I think, a crucial thing as well, through this third-party service funded by the RNIB. That's a change in position from when it was first announced. This year's extension was announced fairly early on after there was such a significant backlash.
You took part in the consultation that has taken place. What happened? How did it work?
Firstly, there was the open letter that was signed by over 1,200 people. Then a select few voices, including myself, who have been most insistent, met with senior management at the RNIB, somewhat private meeting, but very much with input from the community. We really stressed at that meeting that there was a need for greater transparency, and presumably the RNIB took that on board because they did then hold a consultation with service users. So they were split into 3 groups, and per round of consultation, there were then those 3 groups who met with the RNIB, and an external organisation was brought in to deliver the consultation, so to have an element of impartiality. There was a first round in sort of August, second round in September, and then we are expecting at some point a consultation report. I don't know when that will happen. We haven't had a confirmation of a date. We have been told the result of the consultation will be communicated to us all.
What's your gut feeling about what is likely to happen next? And perhaps rather different, what would you like to happen?
My gut feeling is that we won't get the outcome we want, which is for the RNIB to maintain their transcription service themselves. That was not presented as an option during the consultation. In the second round of the consultation, we were given several options to discuss of outcomes. Several of those were completely unfeasible, and it was a bit frustrating that they were included because it wasted a lot of time in the discussion. They were already things we'd all ruled out in the first round. The best out of a bad bunch of options was that an external provider continues the transcription funded at least in part by the RNIB, which is still not the level of service that we had before.
What are your own transcription needs and how are you meeting them at the moment?
I would say predominantly mine are actually in the form of tactile diagrams, which are sort of very impossible to transcribe on your own as a blind person. You need to essentially redraw a visual diagram in a way that can be accessed by a blind person. So I have actually just sent off some diagrams to be transcribed, which I'm looking forward to receiving. I occasionally also have the need to have multilingual Braille transcribed for personal use. So I do have relatively varied transcription needs, and these are things that I cannot do myself.
What's your feeling about how this can be resolved in a really satisfactory way for blind people?
The ideal outcome would be that the RNIB, they have a transcription service. They have a commercial transcription service. You can pay them as a business to have things transcribed. My personal view is that personal transcription should be done through this arm of the RNIB. If you're going to pay hundreds of pounds to an external company, surely you're better off paying hundreds of pounds to your own internal transcription division. It just would seem to make more financial sense. My fear is that with it being an external provider, at any point that agreement could get cut, the RNIB could say it's not financially sustainable, and it's just they're slowly sliding away from producing Braille themselves.
Connor Scott Gardner. Well, time now to concentrate on the specific issue of Braille music transcription. Now, there may not be an automatic link between blindness and music virtuosity, as some people seem to believe, but it is true that significant numbers of visually impaired people earn a living from music, either as performers or teachers or both, not to mention those for whom music and playing it is one of their major pleasures. Well, James Risdon is a professional recorder player. Here's a taste of his playing. It's a piece from Boffin, composed by Jacob van Eyck. And James, you wrote at the time a very angry letter to the CEO of the RNIB. The policy was reversed. We don't know how temporary that is. What's your mood now?
I think my mood, like many blind musicians, is just utter bewilderment and frustration. It's great that we've got a consultation and we should let that take its course. But I think a lot of us feel that the very fact that we are in a consultation where RNIB feels it needs to consult with blind people on the importance of Braille is in many ways rather ludicrous. And it's so sad for those of us who were educated by RNIB. I've worked at RNIB. RNIB has given me a lot over the years. It's just so frustrating that here in 2025, we have to actually go through the whole process of deciding just how important it is for blind people to have information in alternative formats.
How well are the needs of blind musicians currently being met? What are their choices? What are their alternatives if they want transcription?
If you want music in Braille or indeed large print, you actually don't have very many options. RNIB has been a constant provider of Braille music transcriptions ever since it was founded. It goes all the way back to Louis Braille himself being a musician. It's one of RNIB's fundamental services. There haven't been many commercial providers. There have been one or two, but actually providing really high quality music in a different format is a specialist skill, and it's very difficult to scale that up into being a commercial product rather than a charitable service. I've had a quote from a commercial company for a piece of music and you're looking at several £100s, so it's actually completely economically unviable. It's not just about RNIB providing a charitable service in line with its charter. Being involved in this allows RNIB to speak and campaign on things like guidelines and standards and technological developments, which are undoubtedly happening, and also then to be the authentic voice of VI people in terms of campaigning and advocacy.
But I mean, the RNIB has, I think, currently outsourced the transcription work to another company. And Connor made the point that there are quite a lot of people around in the RNIB who have these skills.
We're in a really, really baffling position where RNIB has got almost all of the UK specialist transcribers, and yet it is outsourcing work to a commercial organisation who, as yet, don't have any Braille music expertise and are paying for the service to boot. So if we get to next April and the funding for this service stops, then it will put many of us in a really, really invidious position of not being able to access easily scores which we need to. We shouldn't underestimate the work publishers are doing to enable their files to be shared and converted into Braille automatically. But many of us don't have the time to chase publishers and correct files and work out what's intended. We need to spend the time actually learning and practicing. And it does impose a bit of a glass ceiling on what you can actually take on as a musician.
We've just had a very recent statement from the RNIB. This is what they told us.
Looking ahead, we are working across sectors to build understanding of the legal obligations to provide customers with sight loss access to materials in their preferred accessible format. We remain deeply committed to delivering services that place Braille at their core, from RNIB Bookshare, which supports access to educational materials and textbooks, to our library collection, which includes over 11,000 Braille books. We will share more on personal transcription once our work with the community and forward planning is complete.
I mean, just to stay with you for a moment, James, what's your reaction to that? Because that does seem like what the RNIB is saying. Who else can we get to do this?
Well, it's not a ringing endorsement, is it? It's not saying, we're delighted, we want to do more Braille production, we want to develop our services, we want to be more innovative, we want to get more Braille into more people's hands more quickly. It sounds like we're trying to see what we can get away with not doing. I personally find it, and I know many blind people do, find it particularly difficult in this year where we celebrated the bicentenary of Louis Braille and celebrated all that Braille means and the opportunities it affords in employment and education, promoted by RNIB on the one hand, and then hearing these proposed cuts on the other. It's a rather difficult sort of quandary to be in.
Well, to get another view on this from a different part of the musical wood, we're joined by Stefan Andrusichin, who's a multi-instrumentalist, notably accordionist, enjoying and playing a wide range of music from rock to choral works. Here he's performing the Carnival of Venice. by Pietro Frosini. What's your own relationship with Braille music, Stefan?
I am a bit of an anathema where Braille music's concerned, because as an accordionist, historically, it's not always been very easy to find sort of original classical accordion repertoire in Braille. Obviously, in order to get the said repertoire transcribed, you need to make some very long-term plans and get the scores sent in. Where I do use it, and use it prolifically, is in a choral setting, because it's very refreshing to be able to stand in a choir with peers and be able to read along with them in rehearsals, and then have something in my hand, even if I have memorized the score, aesthetically, because, you know, you don't want to be the only person in a 16-person chamber choir who hasn't got a folder in his hand. I've been asked very last minute to sing in a performance of a Mozart piece. There's a lot of Latin. My ear is relatively well versed to learning repertoire. I've been doing it for quite some time, but I'd rather have the clarity of being able to look through the score. So what I've done so far is I'm lucky enough to have a Braille display, so refreshable Braille. So I've downloaded a score obtained from an open source website. So the score is in the public domain because it was composed a lot longer than 70 odd years ago. Unfortunately, you're dependent on somebody entering the score accurately. In terms of learning Braille, it's tricky doing it on a one-line display, because you can't get a full sort of visual memory of a score when you're looking at one line at a time. Having looked through the score, there is a glaring omission about 30 or 40 bars into the first movement, which is obvious. So, of course, then that asks the question, well, what else is missing? So I don't want to get to the performance and have to worry about there being something that I'm meant to be doing that I've not got on my kind of botched Heath Robinson type score.
I mean, because I'm old, my concept of Braille music is actually having it in Braille on a piece of paper. But presumably technology and software should mean that it's much easier to do this, isn't it?
You can get a Braille score. How accurate it's going to be is only as good as the material that you put in. Denise, my wife, famously had a text of a piece of music on a Braille display that I lent her. Unfortunately, the Braille display was linked to my son's Google account, and while she was performing the piece, the parental controls kicked in. You're halfway through singing some Mozart and suddenly it says, ask your parent to extend your screen time, which is not ideal. It's a case of garbage in, garbage out. You know, if you get a bad score and you convert it, you will often get a lousy score out. But as James has already alluded to, you don't always have the time or, in fact, the inclination to, you know, fire up your software and go through it forensically and make corrections.
Whether you read your Braille on a piece of paper, which I prefer, or whether you read it on a device, which is equally possible, what we need is the ability to have a score which is accurate and timely. And of course, if you're trying to do all of the steps that Stefan's described, you're going to spend a lot of time. You may have the technological skills to do it, you may not. You may have time to work out what's correct and what's not, but ultimately that takes you away from what you're actually meant to be doing. RNIB, in potentially stepping away from this work, is just leaving a big gaping hole where there's actually no natural successor.
You would think that the fact that there is now technology where you don't actually need a specific knowledge of Braille, if you like, wouldn't that mean that it was possible for far more people or other organisations to do this kind of work?
I think we have to be really clear. There are some instances where technology provides you the option to get some music produced in Braille really quickly, and you can be sure it's 95% correct. The trouble is that you don't know where the mistakes are because none of us can see what the original looks like. And therein lies the ultimate problem. There are people who want to learn accordion music or string music or piano music or harp music or vocal music, and the technology doesn't do a particularly thorough job with those.
As a professional performing musician, is 95% accurate enough? If someone sighted was to buy a print score and it was only 95% accurately typed, there would be a massive stink kicked up. So if it's your job, I would argue that 95% accuracy isn't sufficient.
And if we're talking about people learning Braille as young children or taking exams, it's not good enough to give them scores which are untidy, unclear, ambiguous. We really want to be promoting Braille as a tool for education and life and professional work. And I just don't think it's acceptable to be giving people substandard Braille, which is churned out of a computer somewhere. Some of it's brilliant and some of it needs a human transcriber, and there's always going to be a need for a human being to check.
Just one final thought for you both, which may elicit a groan, but we'll see. Is maybe AI going to come into play more, and might that be a long-term, cheaper solution?
Go on, Steph.
Stefan?
Having played with AI and done various things with it, AI fakes it before it makes it. So I asked AI, as an example, to put together a core of a teaching plan to use a certain screen reader. I am fairly well versed in the use of that screen reader and read what AI churned out, and a lot of it was rubbish. It read convincingly, and to a layman, it was possibly accurate, but when you dig into the weeds of these things, it's not always very precise. And I think in the case of Braille music, where everything needs to be just so, I don't see AI as a viable option.
James, final thought?
I don't actually know, Peter. Probably, in hundreds of years to come, I guess it's inevitable. I just really find it sad that we are seemingly in a world where we ditch expertise and we don't value the human element of being able to speak knowledgeably on a subject. And I would have thought a strong RNIB has a foot in a Braille producing camp and a Braille music camp. And that's what I would really like to see.
We'll have to leave it there. But James Risdon, Stefan Andrew Sishin, and before that, Connor Scott Gardner, thank you all very much. Meanwhile, as Stefan plays us out with Rossini's The Barber of Seville, as always, we want to hear from you. Email us with your questions, your comments, your experiences, intouch@bbc.co.uk, or leave voice messages on 0161 836 1338. From me, Peter White, and producer Fern Lulham. Goodbye.
Scaffolding and Skips news for the week commencing 31st of October 2025. In the Newport area, 1 to 8 Malthouse Court, O2 Shop, Holyrood Street, Providence Corner Building, Pyle Street and Town Lane elevations, TUI Post Office Lane, Savoy Court, Town Lane, 12 High Street, 25 High Street, Carisbrooke, 19 C Street. Newport area skips, 79 Medina Avenue.
The Ryde area, St Mary's Catholic Church, 55 High Street. The Heron, Union Street. House of Zebra, 12 Union Street. 5 Weeks Road. The Star Inn, High Street. 5 Station Street. Boots, 170 to 172 The High Street. Ryde Opticians, 40 Union Street. Ex-Barclays Bank, 7 High Street. 51 George Street, 5 High Street, Bembridge. The Ryde area skips, 58 West Street, 37 Quarry Road, 86 Newnham Road, Binstead.
Cowes area, the Portland Inn, Worsley Road, Gurnard. Cowes area skips, 62 York Street.
The Shanklin area, Nationwide, Regent Street, 10 East Cliff Road.
Ventnor area, Old Town Hall Court, Albert Street, Ashley Villa, Hamborough Road. Ventnor area skips, Woodland, Undercliff Drive, St Lawrence.
The Brading area, Old Brading Town Hall, High Street.
Sandown area, 52 Fitzroy Street.
The Yarmouth area, the Old Town Hall, the Square.